I was just calling because I've kind of looked through a few things like biology, astronomy, things like that, and I can't really find any logical reason not to believe in a higher power, if that makes sense.
Can you find any logical reason to believe in a higher power?
I mean, yeah, quite a bit. I mean,
like what?
I mean, I usually do a kind of a definition type thing, I think, of God in general. I'll just go off and say I'm a pantheist, so I don't follow religious teachings and things like that. But the way I define God is an entity that is composed of all the atoms of the universe and has a consciousness that exists throughout the universe.
Well, it's that last bit that I think we're not so sure about. Because if you were just going to say an entity that has all the atoms of the universe, I would say I already believe in that thing. I just call it the universe.
Well, yeah, I mean, most pantheists just call it the universe.
But I mean, consciousness is a very specific and very complicated thing, and we're not aware that like a universe-wide consciousness exists. So if you were going to make a claim that it does exist, we would have to ask you why.
Well, there's a few scientists, Bernard Hayes, and he says that consciousness isn't necessarily only restricted to biological beings. I mean,
I agree. That's why I'm a big fan of like science fiction that has artificial intelligence. I think that's a cool concept. But I don't see any reason why we should think that the entire universe has one of those. We'd need a reason for that.
Well, there's another scientist, and I'll just quote him real quick. As in principle, some purely physical systems that are not biological or organic may be conscious, and they're actually doing an experiment right now that the conclusion is supposed to be, in I think the end of 2018, where they're going to actually study stars, study the universe itself, and kind of try to show why they think it's actually conscious.
Well, that's interesting. I'd be interested to see how they may go about measuring whether consciousness exists or not, and how they test for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, like we're not even fully sure how to do that on people necessarily. Right. I mean, that is a pretty big claim out there.
It is, but I mean, I'm personally excited about it, but obviously for my own obvious reasons. But the reason I think that higher power is just basically a logical conclusion is just you look at the universe. I mean, everything has a reason for being there. You look at stars, they produce all the elements that basically that we know of. They produce carbon, which led to life on Earth. I mean, meteors put these elements on planets. I mean, it's all basically systematic. There's no real reason to think that it would just happen that way.
Well, I mean, except for the fact that it apparently did.
I mean, that's atheist perspective, really. I mean, that's no different than me saying that it didn't.
Well, but, I mean, where do you think God came from?
I mean, that's actually a question I've asked myself many times, and I've come to two conclusions that either most deists are right in that he's just been there, and I say he obviously wouldn't have a sense of any biological sense.
But if you're willing to accept that as an answer, then it doesn't actually bother you where things come from. Because if you think that it's possible to have a thing just existing all the time for no particular reason, then you're solving a problem that you don't actually think is a problem in the first place. You're saying you don't think it makes sense for the universe to have always been here, but you do think it makes sense for the God to always have been there. So it seems like there's a bit of a double standard going on there.
Well, that's one theory. The other theory that I've kind of come to myself is that this consciousness sort of developed over time, and through working with different elements and things like that, kind of brought in a system that actually led to what we see now. So it's type of
so the consciousness may be developed through natural processes that weren't guided by anything else.
Well, I mean, it makes more sense for an energy that is conscious to come into play than the entire universe.
But wait,
energy.
I mean that basically is the same as saying that the entire universe just came into being. You're just rerouting it through this energy thing that you made up.
Well, that's like saying that all atoms came into being without a supernatural source. It's not necessarily saying that planets, stars, hydrogen collecting and forming stars and all this happening is the same as a conscious being consistent of atoms. I mean,
if anything, a universe creating consciousness seems more complicated and challenging to explain than just a universe.
I mean, not necessarily.
But we know, we see a universe exists and we don't see that a God exists. So generating a God through theorizing about something that you're calling a problem but you don't really have a problem with seems like a strange way to go about finding out the truth.
Okay, but if it's all natural, then even evolution, if you look at our evolution, you go back far enough, we were obviously animalistic, we had fur to deal with weather, we had all these natural adaptations, and there's a point where we get our intelligence that we start losing these adaptations and it actually becomes harmful for our species.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, intelligence is an adaptation too.
It is, but there's a point where that almost wiped us out. Not having fur, not having natural weapons, not having all these things was actually worse for our species than it was good.
When was that? When was that?
I don't know how you're measuring worse, considering that humankind now exists like pretty much everywhere on the entire planet. Like that seems to be kind of a success story to me, at least for now, not assuming anything about what may happen in the future.
Okay, well, if evolution is strictly not guided and it's only adaptation for survival, then what's the real use in going past microorganisms? They can exist with really high temperatures, really low temperatures. They're basically built for survival.
Well, you're assuming that there's a use that's imposed by an external entity again. It's kind of a circular argument.
Yeah.
It's not really circular. It's getting to the point of intelligence.
People developing and spreading all over if I could quote Agent Smith from the Matrix, humanity is a virus, Mr. Anderson. And if you think about it as a virus in a way, like the fact that like a virus could be considered successful, or let's be a little nicer than a virus. Let's talk about a viral video instead. I'm trying to pick something that doesn't date me as an old person because I'm liable to say something that's like, nobody's looked at that video for 5 years. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Somebody punches somebody on a video, and lots of people see that. There is no like necessarily a deciding factor about whether a video spreads or doesn't spread. It kind of just does what it does, and people like or ignore a certain video, but the video itself doesn't have a reason for spreading. And in a similar way, like going back to the concept of a biological virus, there's no intent behind spreading all over the place. It's just that things that spread all over the place ipso facto do wind up being successful by that measurement.
I get what you're saying, but if you look at the universe, you'll see that it's systematic, so there's no real reason not to think that it's designed, at least to an extent.
What do you mean by systematic?
Well, you look at our solar system, you have the sun, you have the planets that that orbit around the sun, and you can look at other solar systems and see the exact same thing. There's a system in the process.
Mm-hmm. It's gravity, but what's the purpose? What's the purpose of Jupiter?
The purpose of Jupiter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why have a bunch of planets that don't sustain life if that's the purpose is to create conditions that are favorable to human life?
Well, you have Saturn. It collects asteroids in our solar system. Keeping them from hitting our planet.
So in your theory, each of the planets that are millions of miles away from us is actually a carefully constructed system with the sole purpose of benefiting humankind.
Well, I'm not saying that every planet out there is for us. I'm not even saying that the whole universe is built for humans specifically, but intelligent life itself.
I mean, don't see a reason to believe that.
I mean, there's a system to it.
Well, I mean, you're saying that in hindsight as one of the things that happens to exist in the universe.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you look at a system, you can obviously conclude logically that there's some sort of designer behind it.
Not typically.
Necessarily.
I mean, not necessarily, but if you're looking for evidence of higher power, it's not that hard to find.
If you are predisposed to assume that there's a higher power, then sure, it's not hard to find things that fit what you want to believe.
I wouldn't say I'm really predisposed for it. I've actually brought atheism to mind several times, and it just doesn't seem like a logical conclusion to what is given to us as a species that we know. And actually, scientists as of right now are so compelled that the universe is systematic that there's even the simulation theory, and people actually accept this as a possibility.
I don't think the fact that some stoner college kids think that, or some particular people with scientific credentials think that the universe could be a simulation in another universe means that science as a whole has decided on that. The thing about science is that it thrives on lots of competing ideas, trying to get mind share, and people testing for those ideas to see whether they're real or not. And it's not a surprise that people have come up with some wild, out there, interesting ideas, which could be true for all I know, but you can't just latch on to speculation that some people do and then use that to build on your assumption that science generally doesn't support.
Okay, well, I mean, do you believe in the Big Bang Theory?
I could go into a long deconstruction of the word believe, but let's just say yeah. for today.
Accept it as the best, currently best explanation.
Oh, you're doing it.
Okay, and you believe it because the evidence given, the circumstantial evidence, you know, the universal expansion, radiation, leads to that logical conclusion.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Okay.
And then?
That's the same as believing in a higher power or logically.
No, because we already established that we agree with the concept that all the atoms of the universe are out there. You made a very specific claim that there is a universal intelligence, and I still think you haven't given a reason to believe that.
I mean, the fact that science is looking into that and trying to prove that.
Science is looking into a lot of things. Science was looking into alchemy at one point. That didn't pan out.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the root of it.
Yeah, I think you're jumping a gun a little bit. Just because science is looking, or people are looking at something and trying to see how it works, doesn't mean that the conclusion is valid, that your conclusion is valid.
Specifically for the consciousness. I mean, they're seeing the signs of the consciousness, so they're trying to take information that they can validate to other people and basically show that it's not just their conclusion, it's factual.
Yeah, and if they do come up with evidence, that would be interesting, but, you know, I would want to know what the experiment involves and how consciousness is defined and how, you know, there's all kinds of things that would go into that.
Well, yeah, and that begs the question of how do you actually show people that don't really understand the universe how it shows signs of consciousness.
Right. So, Jordan, it's an interesting conversation. I think we're going to move on.